The cold air of the barracks was thick with silence. Not the kind that comes after a battle, but the kind that settles when grown men are trying to keep from screaming. Commander Red stood by the window, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. No one spoke his name. Not now. Not after what came through the feed. The footage hadn't been meant for public release. Hell, it hadn't even been meant for the higher-ups on the orbital platform. But someone leaked it. Someone made sure they saw it. A dozen children, human children, locked in glowing cages, barely able to sit up. Alien guards with serpentine limbs circled them, prodding them with electric rods like they were animals. One kid, barely 5, maybe 6, was curled up in the corner, his lip busted open, sobbing through a cracked voice, "I want my dad!" And the worst part? The aliens were laughing. They had no idea what they'd just done. Not really. Because the people watching that footage weren't diplomats or politicians or journalists. They were soldiers, fathers, brothers, uncles, men who'd bled on 100 worlds, seen comrades turned to dust in alien fire, and still followed Earth's fragile peace policies because it was the right thing to do, because humanity was trying to be better. But this changed everything. Red turned from the window, eyes darker than space. "They think we're still playing their game," he said, voice low and bitter. "They forgot who we are when you corner us, when you take what we love." Sergeant Dunn didn't speak. He just sat there, the video frozen on his daughter's face. Her eyes were swollen shut. Her lips trembled, whispering something over and over again. "Daddy's coming. Daddy's coming. I want firepower reports from every division. Now," Red growled. "No more diplomacy. No more waiting. We've begged, we've warned, we've played nice." He slammed his fist on the holotable. "They caged our damn kids. They think Earth's still soft. They want to see monsters. We'll give them monsters." The silence broke then. Not with cheers, not with speeches, just men standing, wordless, faces hard. They knew what came next. The Alien Council had violated every law, every treaty. They thought humanity's restraint was weakness. They were wrong. Far across the void, aboard the alien dreadnought Zerun Thal, Ambassador Kivos was already panicking. The message had come through their intelligence channels not 10 minutes ago. The humans have seen the footage. Kivos didn't understand the outcry. "They're just offspring. Weak, undeveloped. We've done worse to our own during discipline," he muttered, pacing. But then one of his aides, a younger Zirakian, staggered into the room, eyes wide with fear. "Ambassador, we intercepted human military comms. They're mobilizing, all of them." "What?" Kivos frowned. "That's impossible. They don't have the authority. They don't care," the aide whispered. "Sir, one of their commanders sent a direct transmission. No encryption. Broadcast wide." He played the message. The voice came through like thunder. "This is Commander Red of Earth's 7th Defense Corps. To all alien nations monitoring this frequency, you touched our children. You crossed a line that no civilization should ever cross. There will be no peace. There will be no mercy. You've brought doom upon yourselves." The room fell silent. Even Kivos couldn't find the words. He looked at the aide. "Surely, they won't risk total war over juveniles." The aide only stared back at him, shaking his head slowly. "You don't understand humans. They're not fighting for politics. They're fighting for their young." And in that moment, even the ambassador realized the war wasn't just coming. It had already begun. The engines of the Vanguard screamed like angry gods. It wasn't the biggest warship in Earth's fleet, but it was the fastest, and the one with the least tolerance for red tape. That's why Red chose it. He didn't need committees. He didn't want meetings. He needed action, speed, fear. The Vanguard shot through slipspace like a blade through flesh, en route to the Orion expanse. Direct coordinates of the alien facility that held the children. 300 confirmed hostages, ages between 4 and 11, all human. Some from Mars colonies, some from Earth, one kid from the Europa outpost, and not one of them should have ever been there. Red sat in the command chair, staring straight ahead, but not seeing stars. He saw that little boy again. The one crying for his dad. He didn't know who the father was, but he knew he wasn't alone in the need to answer the call. ETA to drop zone, he asked. 32 minutes, the nav officer replied. Red nodded, fingers twitching around the armrest. He didn't like waiting. Not anymore. Waiting had cost them lives. Waiting had cost them trust. Peace had a price, and now it was hanging from chains in an alien prison. Behind him, the crew worked in silence. No banter, no nerves. Every one of them had watched the footage. Every one of them had someone back home. Sons, daughters, nieces, brothers, sisters. You didn't have to be a father to understand. You just had to be human. They all knew what they were flying into, and not one of them hesitated. Red opened the internal comms. Crew of the Vanguard, this is your commander speaking. What you've seen can't be unseen. What we're about to do, no court on Earth can authorize. No treaty can excuse. This isn't sanctioned by the United Front. This isn't endorsed by the Galactic Concord. This is justice, pure and brutal. He paused. They took our children. They beat them, starved them, caged them like animals, and they laughed. Now his voice grew cold. So we'll remind them of what humans do when pushed too far. When the ones we love are hurt, this isn't war. He stood. This is reckoning. Silence followed, and then, one by one, voices crackled through the comms. For my son. For my niece. For Earth. For every kid who cried in the dark and thought we forgot them. Red shut off the comms. He didn't need a rally. He needed focus. 30 minutes. That's all the aliens had left to breathe easy. Far across the void, the alien facility sat in cold arrogance. Orbiting a dead moon, it wasn't even heavily guarded. Why would it be? It was a disciplinary center, according to their records. A place to reform and study emotionally erratic species. That's what they called it. Erratic, human children. Emotionally erratic. The guards there were casual, bored. Their shift rotations hadn't changed in months. No resistance, no threats. Just a bunch of weak, crying offspring from a backwater species trying too hard to play big in the galaxy. One guard passed a cage where a little girl, maybe 7, was sitting with her head down, whispering to herself. He sneered. Still crying for your sky rock, little monkey? She didn't look up. Another one laughed. They think someone's coming. A third shrugged. Let them think. It gives them hope. Hope makes them easier to break. They kept walking. None of them noticed the girl's lips stop moving. None of them saw the look in her eyes change. She wasn't whispering for Earth. She was whispering to her father, and he was already on his way. Coming out of slipspace in 10. Red stood behind the pilot as the Vanguard shook, metal groaning as it tore through dimensions back into physical space. Prep the rail cannons, Red said. Hit their comms tower first. I don't want them calling for help. The weapons officer nodded, fingers flying across controls. 7, 6, 5. The crew braced. 2, 1. Space ripped open like a scream. The Vanguard burst through, thrusters flaring, weapons hot. Target in sight. The alien prison orbiting the dead moon, gray and cold and full of screams. Fire! Twin beams of kinetic hell ripped out from the Vanguard's underbelly. They struck the comms tower dead center. The entire structure exploded outward, silent in the vacuum but glorious on the screen. Fire, debris, static. They'll know we're here now, the pilot said. They already do, Red growled. Let's finish this. In the prison facility, alarms howled. The guards scrambled, confused. Who fired? What species? Human signature, one shouted, panicked. One vessel, Earth-class dreadnought, Vanguard. Just one? But no one laughed this time. Because every alien in the galaxy knew the Vanguard. The humans didn't send fleets. They sent messages. And Vanguard was the loudest message Earth ever built. Raise shields, the commander barked. But it was too late. Drop pods rained from above like fireballs. Half of them weren't even piloted. Just slabs of steel and fury, crashing through their walls, blowing holes through corridors. The facility erupted into chaos, and in the middle of it, through the breach in the eastern wing, came boots. Dozens of them. Human soldiers in black armor, rifles ready, masks down. They moved with one purpose: find the children. Kill anything in the way. Red led them, rifle drawn, HUD scanning through walls. First section. Follow the biosignatures to sub-level 3. Breach and clear. Copy. Second section. With me. We take the command center. No survivors. Understood. Red didn't flinch as a guard leapt from the shadows with a plasma spear. He caught it mid-swing, crushed the wrist, and drove his boot into the creature's chest so hard it cracked armor. Wrong species, Red muttered. Down in sub-level 3, the cages shook as the walls rattled. Explosions echoed, lights flickered, and then, for the first time in weeks, the children heard something new. Gunfire. Not alien. Human. One of the boys gasped. They came. The girl in the corner whispered again. I told you. The door burst open, and there he stood. Sergeant Dunn, 6'5", rage in his blood, a rifle still smoking from the last kill, his eyes locked on his daughter's broken face. She didn't cry. She just reached out and said, Hi, Daddy. He dropped the rifle and ran to her. Upstairs, Red cornered the alien facility commander in the main control room. The bastard was bleeding from the leg, his glowing robes shredded. You can't do this, the alien hissed. This violates every treaty. You violated every line of decency, Red snapped, grabbing the creature by the throat and slamming him against the panel. They were subjects of study, the alien gasped. Nothing more. They were children. The alien wheezed, eyes bulging. This will start a war. Red leaned close. No, this is the war. He dropped the alien, turned, and set his rifle to overload. He jammed it into the console, wires sparking. You tell your kind what happened here. You tell them what it means to touch Earth's young. He walked away as the rifle exploded, taking the command room and the whole data core with it. By the time they evacuated, the facility was crumbling. Fire burned through its walls. Debris floated in orbit. Alien bodies drifted in silence. Every human child was accounted for. Not all were unharmed. Some would never be the same. But they were homebound. Back aboard the Vanguard, the med bays were filled with small voices. Soft, tired, but no longer afraid. Red stood in the observation deck, watching the burning ruin of the facility through the glass. Behind him, Dunn approached. She told me. She never gave up, Dunn said quietly. She kept saying we'd come. Red nodded. She was right. Dunn looked at him. You think they'll retaliate? Oh, absolutely. Think we can take it? Red turned, jaw hard. Let them try. He didn't say it, but they both knew. This was only the beginning. The galaxy had long treated humanity like a strange pet. Aggressive, emotional, primitive. They'd forgotten that pets bite. And when you hurt what humans protect, we don't just bite, we burn your world to ash. The Galactic Concord met in panic. Representatives of 12 dominant species filled the high chamber on Valtor Prime, the old seat of galactic diplomacy. It was usually a place of patience, arrogance, and theater, not screaming. But today, the chamber was loud with fear. Screens displayed the burning wreckage of the prison facility. The orbiting cameras, at least the ones still transmitting, showed the crumpled ruins, bodies floating in vacuum, and the unmistakable scorch patterns left by Earth's rail weaponry. No survivors, no negotiations, just blood and smoke. Ambassador Vorox of the Zirakian High Chair slammed a clawed fist on the table. You allowed them to strike a sovereign installation. A human warship breached our borders, murdered our scientists, and destroyed our research facility. Research? Growled General Urtag of the Goran Imperium. You mean the place where you were torturing children? That wasn't research. That was an execution ground. They were specimens. They were children, Urtag roared, rising to his feet, his voice thundering through the hall. Do not insult this council with word games. The humans warned you, and you ignored them. Warned us? Hissed Vorox. They butchered us. There were no negotiations, no demands. Because they already made their demands, and we all ignored them. The hall quieted for a moment. No one liked admitting it, but everyone knew the truth. For years, the Conquered had dismissed humanity's complaints. The abductions, the illegal studies, the occasional missing transport ship, small matters compared to galactic politics. Earth had no standing army in the Conquered, no voting seat. They were too young, too volatile, too human. And so, humanity had waited, patiently, bitterly, quietly, until someone, the Zirakians, pushed too far. And now the response was on the screen. In flames, in ashes. Ambassador Vorox glared at the council. Then we must respond. Earth must pay for this act of war. And who's going to volunteer to fight them? Asked a thin, tall ambassador from the Jireli Alliance. You? Vorox hissed, but said nothing. Because they all remembered what humanity had done during the Jovek incursion 5 years ago. Back then, when the Joveks began raiding Conquered supply lines, most member worlds voted for sanctions, diplomacy, containment. But Earth? Earth sent 10 ships. No announcement, no vote. 10 ships went dark. And when they reappeared 3 weeks later, the Jovek fleet was gone. Not defeated, erased. Every Jovek colony bombed into craters. Their language files deleted from Conquered records, their planets still uninhabitable. The Conquered had never sanctioned Earth because they were afraid. And now it was happening again. Only this time, Earth wasn't defending supply lines. They were defending their own. They only sent 1 ship, the Jireli ambassador whispered, his voice cold. 1. Back on Earth, President Halden stood in the war room, the lights dim, the table lit with holograms of troop movement, fleet positioning, and alien communication intercepts. They're rattled, said Admiral Niles, arms folded. Conquered scrambling to keep their species in check. Half of them are terrified, the other half want revenge. Which half do you think has the numbers? Halden asked. The terrified ones, Niles replied, but scared animals still bite. Halden sighed, rubbing his temples. He didn't like war, not the way some of his predecessors had, but he knew it now like a second language. Any word from Red? He's aboard the Vanguard, standing by near Neptune. Says he'll follow orders, but... Niles hesitated. But what? He also said this. If Earth pulls back now, we're telling the galaxy that our children are fair game. Halden closed his eyes. He's not wrong. No, he's not. The room went quiet. The cost of action weighed heavy, but the cost of inaction would be far worse. Halden looked up. Then we send the message. Make it official. 2 hours later, a human envoy arrived at Valter Prime. Alone. She stepped into the conquered chamber with no security, no guards, and no entourage, just a black case in one hand. The room fell silent. "You have no place here," Ambassador Vorox hissed. The envoy said nothing. She walked calmly to the central console and opened the case. Inside was a glass vial. Inside the vial was a severed alien finger. Burned, branded, still twitching. She placed it on the table. "This belonged to the head of the prison facility," she said calmly. "The one who oversaw the torture of our young." Gasps. A few gagged. One delegate stumbled back. "He was given the choice to speak to Earth directly. He refused, so now he speaks in silence." She looked up, eyes scanning the room. No more negotiations. No more tolerance. From this moment forward, any species, nation, or government found trafficking or harming human children will be designated as hostile. Earth will treat it as an act of war, and we will not ask for permission to respond. Ambassador Vorox growled. "You think this threat will bring us to our knees? You think your little planet can bully the stars?" The envoy turned slowly, walked back to the case, reached in again. This time she pulled out a data drive. She placed it on the table next to the finger. "No threat," she said. "Just records." "Records of what?" She smiled without warmth. "Every alien species that ever laid a hand on a human child." Back on Earth, in the silence of a small home on the outskirts of Cape Colony, Red stood in a living room he hadn't seen in years. It smelled the same. Old wood, steel polish, the scent of a fireplace that hadn't been lit in a decade. His hands trembled as he held a drawing. Crayon. Bright colors, a stick figure in black armor, a girl holding his hand. Above them, "My daddy is a hero." The paper was wrinkled, faded, the edges curled. She wasn't his kid. But she could have been, and that was enough. Outside, a news drone hovered. A reporter's voice drifted through the window. Reports indicate that Earth's ultimatum has shaken the galactic conquered. Several minor species have already sent formal apologies and offered reparations. Others have cut all contact with Zirakian space. Red set the drawing down and stared out at the stars. They always thought humanity would kneel, that Earth was too emotional, too volatile, too human. Now the galaxy was learning the truth. You can mock our culture, dismiss our science, laugh at our passion, but don't touch our blood. Because when you hurt our children, we stop being civilized. The war hadn't started yet, not officially, but the chessboard was set. And Earth didn't come to play. The silence before war isn't peace, it's a setup. Back in low orbit above Mars, Commander Red stood in full armor, helmet under his arm, watching 3 massive cruisers undock from the hangar bays below. The fleet was growing. Earth hadn't mobilized like this in 50 years. Not since the Lunar Rebellion. But there was something else in the air now, something heavier. Rage had fueled the strike on the prison facility, but rage only burns hot for so long. After that comes the long war, and Red could feel it already, that dragging pull in his chest. It wasn't over. It wasn't even close. "Sir," said his comms officer, "we've received encrypted intelligence from Terran DeepNet. You're going to want to hear this." Red followed the officer into the comms room, where a single file blinked on the holoscreen. Classification: Omega Red, highest clearance. He opened it. At first, he didn't say a word. His jaw locked. His eyes scanned line after line. Then he exhaled. "Get the President. Secure line. Now." Back in the war room, President Halden paced in front of the holotable while Admiral Niles stood behind him, arms crossed like a statue carved from steel. Red's face appeared on the screen. No salute, no hesitation. "Mr. President," Red said, "we've confirmed it." Halden nodded grimly. "I read the report." You don't sound surprised. I'm not. Admiral Niles leaned forward. For the rest of us, would someone like to explain why we just received footage showing Terran children being sold in black market auctions across 3 alien sectors? Halden's voice was low. Because this wasn't just one facility. This has been going on for decades. Silently, systematically, covered up by trade syndicates and backdoor deals with minor species. The Zirakians weren't the beginning. They were the middle. They were the tip of the blade, Red growled. Now we're seeing the full weapon. The president tapped a command and pulled up a galaxy map. Dozens of red dots blinked across the stars. Every one of these is a suspected trafficking site. Research labs, slave hubs, flesh markets, all confirmed to have housed or sold human miners within the last 20 years. Admiral Niles clenched his jaw. And the Conquered knew. They all knew, Red said. They didn't stop it. Hell, some of them profited off it. Niles spat. Those diplomatic bastards, they smiled in our faces, shook our hands, and sold our kids behind the curtain. Now you see why I say this isn't over. The president nodded. This war won't be clean or short. We're not just fighting soldiers now. We're hunting monsters, Red said, and monsters don't hide on battlefields. They hide behind masks. Meanwhile, deep in the Vakar cluster, aboard a ship with no registry and no name, High Broker Luthien stood before his buyers. A dozen species, all cloaked in holograms to obscure identity. One spoke, its voice robotic and distorted. You're sure the footage is real? Oh yes, Luthien said, smoothing his pale, eel-like face. The humans are mobilizing, full force. They burned the Zirakian facility to ash. And Earth will blame us. They already do, the voices murmured. Luthien smiled thinly. And that is an opportunity. Another voice cut in. Earth will come for us. They'll try, Luthien said, stepping to a console and playing a silent video. Grainy footage of a human child, maybe 8 years old, strapped to a lab table, eyes wide, body trembling. Fear fuels them, he said softly. But fear also blinds them. Earth will make enemies faster than they can kill them, and that chaos will make us rich. Another buyer leaned forward. And what of the children? Luthien shrugged. There are always more. Back in Terran orbit, aboard the flagship Crucible, Earth's high command gathered for a meeting behind closed doors. The footage of the auctions had leaked. Not to the media, but to the soldiers. Every Marine, every pilot. Every officer with a secure link had seen it. Children sold naked, tagged like cattle, paraded for alien buyers who laughed and pointed. Some were missing limbs, some cried, some just stared, empty-eyed, no longer expecting rescue. One clip showed a little boy no older than 6 being pulled from his mother. She screamed. He screamed. The alien tore them apart. The mother was later found dead. The boy was never recovered. And the effect on Earth's military? Rage. Unfiltered, unrelenting. On the front lines, in the darkest corners of the galaxy, something changed overnight. Human soldiers began ignoring surrender signals. They stopped accepting prisoners, any alien caught with Terran child DNA in their system. Dead. No trial, no discussion, just a bullet between the eyes. Even some of Earth's allies grew nervous. The Varkathi, a race known for neutrality, sent a warning. Your vengeance may create a fire you can't control. Red replied personally. Let it burn. In the days that followed, human black ops teams began executing off-the-books missions. Facilities suspected of trafficking were vaporized without warning. Black market freighters carrying stasis pods were hijacked and turned into explosive wrecks, set adrift into the suns of their home systems. Entire criminal syndicates began disappearing overnight. Some assumed new names. Some begged for Concord protection. The Concord issued an emergency meeting to censure Earth. They never got the chance, because Earth withdrew from the Concord entirely. With a single broadcast, President Holden delivered the final blow. "We will not share a table with cowards who allowed our children to be hunted. Earth doesn't answer to you. We answer to our dead, and they demand blood." Not all humans agreed with the path Earth had taken. Some called it madness, others righteous. But one thing was certain: Earth was no longer a planet among stars. It had become something far more dangerous, a reckoning wearing a flag. On the outer rim, in a mining colony known as Grathol 5, an alien scientist named Kevik ran through the rusted corridors, clutching a small human girl in his arms. She cried into his chest, her skin raw from beatings, her feet bleeding. Kevik was Jirakian, one of the enemy. But not all enemies are monsters. He had worked in one of the facilities, been told the children were orphans, lab-grown, non-sentient. He had believed them, until one girl looked him in the eye and whispered, "My mom sings to me, in dreams." And Kevik had broken. Now, with blood on his claws and a child in his arms, he ran for the evac pad, praying Earth wouldn't find him before he could prove he wasn't like the rest. He activated the distress beacon. To his surprise, it was answered by a human ship. The voice was calm, male, cold. "Identify cargo." Kevik hesitated. "One Terran female, age 7, unharmed." "Coordinates locked. Do not resist. Do not run. If the girl is harmed, your death will be slow." Kevik sighed and knelt, holding the girl close. "You're going home," he whispered. "I don't have a home," she said. He looked up at the stars. "You do now." The stars were always quiet before betrayal. That was what Red kept thinking as he stared out of the Vanguard's viewport. They were docked at a supply outpost near Saturn's ring. A neutral ground, technically, supposedly friendly. But his instincts hadn't been quiet, not for days. Something stank, too many whispers, too many intercepted comms that didn't add up. Earth's recon satellites had picked up strange movements around the Vair colonies, an allied system. And now the Vair ambassador had gone dark. No comms, no replies, not even excuses. Red didn't like ghosts, especially not ghosts with fleets. "Pull the secure lines from the Saturn outpost," Red barked at his comms officer. "I want every log from the last 72 hours, power signatures, docking clearances, everything." "Yes, sir." "And get me a private channel to Admiral Niles. Triple encryption, no relays." He turned back toward the observation window, jaw tight. The Vair had been allies for nearly 12 years. They shared tech, training, weapons. They'd bled beside Terran troops during the Methar riots. But now, they were missing. And the timing couldn't be worse. Earth had enemies everywhere. Red had made sure of that. The human campaign against the traffickers had scorched systems clean. No survivors, no prisoners. And now Earth's warpath was growing teeth the size of moons. But one thing Earth had always relied on, maybe too much, was its few loyal allies. If even one of them turned, Earth would be fighting the stars alone. In the cold black of deep space, a Vair stealth ship floated near the edge of the helix fringe. Inside, Ambassador Thren Vossel paced nervously, his segmented hands twitching in the low gravity. His eyes flicked to the encrypted screen. "Status: encryption complete. Message ready for upload. Destination: Galactic Concord Black Tribunal." He hesitated. He didn't hate humans, not personally, but he knew where this was going. The humans had changed, once proud, bold, but now dangerous, violent, unforgiving, and too many in the Concord saw them as a liability. The Vair were survivors, diplomats, traitors, and survivors knew when to shift sides, not with hate, with logic. He tapped the console. The message uploaded. Meanwhile, Red stood still as the data scrolled in front of him. His comms officer had brought him the Saturn logs. Multiple Vare ships docked 3 days ago, the officer said, pale. No crew manifests, no offloading data. And then, he pointed to the readout, we found this. A transmission, encrypted, but cracked by Earth's BlackNet AI within 20 minutes. The contents were simple and damning. Recommend surgical strike on Earth's orbital command array. Disable Terran launch capability. Cripple their mobility before Phase 2. Signed, Vare High Command. Red didn't blink, didn't curse. He just said 2 words. Prep missiles. Across Earth's military channels, the order spread like a virus. Operation Lanternfall, an immediate preemptive strike on Vare military infrastructure. No declarations, no warnings, full blackout. The betrayal had already happened. Now came the answer. 3 hours later, in the skies above Vare Prime, Earth's missiles rained down. From orbit, they looked like shooting stars. To the Vare, they were judgment. The first wave took out orbital docks, defense cannons, power grids. The second wave, ground units, command bunkers, transport hubs. By the time the third wave came, the Vare were already begging for talks. But Earth wasn't listening. Red didn't send negotiators. He sent the vanguard. Inside the remains of the Vare capital, ash filled the sky. Civilians screamed. Fires burned in towers once used for trade diplomacy. The Vare weren't warriors. They weren't ready. And Earth hadn't come for battle. They came for punishment. Red stood in the command dome, his boots cracking glass and blood beneath them. A Vire commander knelt at his feet, antennae twitching with fear. We never meant war, the alien choked. We were pressured by the conquered, forced into it. Red looked down at him. You sold our trust. No, we sold our silence, not your lives. Same thing. He pulled his sidearm and fired a single round through the creature's skull. Back in orbit, Admiral Niles watched the reports flow in from dozens of Terran ships. Primary targets eliminated, resistance minimal. He rubbed his temples. This wasn't supposed to happen, he muttered. Beside him, President Halden stared at the screen, unmoving. We're not in a war anymore, the president said. Niles looked at him. Then what the hell are we in? Halden's voice was soft, hollow. We're in a crusade. Far away, in a dark chamber on Zarian 9, the conquered tribunal met behind closed walls. 12 delegates, all masked, all cowards, and all afraid. They burned Vare Prime. Without warning. They're unhinged. Humanity has become the galaxy's virus. Then we purge it. The order was signed. Within days, mercenary fleets, blacklisted legions, exiled soldiers, criminal warbands were contacted. They had one mission: destabilize Earth, hit its colonies, corrupt its systems, bleed it dry from within. The war was about to change again. Not from above, but from within. They struck first in Osaka Dome, quiet, precise, and surgical. A power outage, blamed on a weather satellite malfunction. A failed vaccine shipment to the Martian colonies, rerouted mid-transit. 3 prominent AI engineers found dead within 48 hours. 1 shot, 1 hanged, 1 disappeared. And no one saw it coming, because it wasn't fleets or battleships anymore. It was mercenaries, infiltrators, sleeper agents, paid for by the galactic conquered. Masked behind neutrality, and Earth, still licking its wounds from the Vare betrayal, hadn't seen the second wave begin. But Red? He felt it. It started with a message, not an official transmission, not military protocol, just a burner comm, no trace, no ID, a 5-second audio clip. Commander Red, they're not coming from orbit this time. They're already inside. He played it 3 times. No voice recognition, no digital watermark. But deep down, in his gut, the part of him that had buried comrades and seen betrayal too many times, he knew it was real. The problem was, he didn't know how deep it went. Back at the Terran Intelligence Agency, Director Soren paced in front of a screen showing over a dozen surveillance feeds. Cities across Earth, the Moon, Mars, Ganymede. "You're telling me the Concord didn't even send a fleet," he said, narrowing his eyes. "They sent mercs?" "Not just mercs," the analyst replied. "They sent specialists, former Terran operatives even, some of our own, bought and turned years ago." Soren's face tightened. "Traitors. We're calling them the Hollow. They look human, sound human. Some are human, but their loyalty is gone. Dead." Soren turned slowly to the screen. Feed number 17 showed a clean-cut man walking into a hospital in New Berlin, dressed like a medic, ID scanned, access cleared. 10 minutes later, the hospital's oxygen system failed. 47 dead. "He was Terran?" Soren asked. "Yes, sir. Born in Miami. Served with Recon Delta. Went dark 3 years ago. We marked him as KIA on Venus." Soren's voice dropped. "Bring in Red." Within the hour, Commander Red entered the cold room. Face stone still, armor unzipped, sidearm at his waist. Soren wasted no time. "They're already inside. Everywhere." Red didn't flinch. "We've confirmed 9 operations across 3 major domes, all surgical. All with 0 survivors. They're targeting infrastructure, personnel, and public morale." "And the press?" Red asked. Soren gave a bitter laugh. "Still arguing about the ethics of orbital bombardment. Meanwhile, Earth is bleeding from the inside." Red nodded once. "Then we need to cut the infection out." Soren leaned forward. "I want you off the front lines, Red. You're too visible. You've become a symbol. They'll target you next. Let them. This isn't a shootout. This is shadows. You want to help, you go dark." Red paused. For years he had fought head-on. Warheads, boots, drop zones, iron. But this was cancer. Quiet. Slow. Deadly. And the only way to fight cancer was from within. 3 days later, Red disappeared. No fanfare, no announcement, no trace. Officially, Commander Red had returned to Orbital Command for reassignment. Unofficially, he was walking through Terran cities as just another face. No armor, no name. Hunting ghosts. He started in Cape Colony, his last known location before the Ver betrayal. He retraced movements, mapped old paths, checked every camera blind spot. In less than 6 hours, he spotted it. A pattern. Small black drone capsules, no larger than a child's toy, passing through sewer systems, transmitting data. Unregistered. Untraceable. He followed one, down through an old maintenance shaft, through steam and rust, until he found the source. A room, no guards, no lights, just a terminal running on cold fusion and data. So much data, feeding live to an encrypted beacon. He tapped in. No password, no barrier, too easy, too inviting. Then the screen lit up. A single message. "You finally stopped barking, Red. Welcome to the cage." The door behind him slammed shut. They didn't kill him right away. That wasn't the goal. They wanted him alive. To break him. To prove that even Earth's most feared warfighter could be bent from within. They pumped the room with a gas that dulled the nervous system. No pain, just silence. Darkness. They showed him videos. Footage from the auction houses. The kids screaming, the ones Earth hadn't saved. Then voices, some real, some twisted. "You failed them, Red. You saved one ship. We sold thousands. You kill monsters, but monsters don't care. You're just a weapon pointed at the wrong end of the gun." Hours blurred into days into hallucinations. But one thing stayed sharp in Red's mind. the promise he made. Touch our children, and you won't find peace. You'll find fire. And the fire never left him. They thought they had broken him. But Red didn't break. He waited, watched, listened. He counted guard rotations by the sound of boots, measured wall density by the echo of his breathing. And when the gas vents failed for 7 seconds during a routine systems reset, he held his breath, faked the coma. When the door opened, he tore the first guard's throat out with his bare hands. By the time the second screamed, Red had a knife. By the time the third pulled his sidearm, Red had his weapon first. It took him 14 minutes to clear the entire compound. He didn't ask questions. He didn't show mercy. He left a message on the terminal before detonating the core. This is Earth's silence. Get used to it. Commander Red. He didn't go back to base. He didn't check in. He went deeper, underground, into black channels, smuggler networks, places Terran law never touched. And what he found? Proof. The Hollow weren't just mercenaries. They were being fed intel from within. Earth had a traitor, high level. Someone with access to military movements, command rotations, encryption keys. Someone who had sat in the war room. Someone trusted. Red sent one message, just 3 words. We've been infiltrated. And then he vanished again. This time not as a ghost. This time as a hunter. The rain fell hard on the outskirts of New Boston. Black water laced with ash, runoff from the orbital furnaces burning wreckage above. The kind of rain that made people stay inside, lock their doors, and pretend the world wasn't bleeding. But Red moved through it like it wasn't even there. No armor, no insignia, no name. Just a man chasing ghosts with a sidearm in his coat and hell in his chest. It had taken him 9 days and 2 dead informants to reach this point. 9 days of back channels, buried code, and whispers in corridors that didn't legally exist. But now, he had a name. Eland Cray, Chief Strategist, Orbital Defense Division, former war hero. Decorated 3 times for leadership during the Mercury Rebellion. Advisor to President Halden himself. And a traitor. Red didn't want to believe it. Eland had fought beside him in the same unit years ago. They'd been brothers in blood, not just in uniform. But the files were clear. Cray had access to the encryption keys used by the Hollow mercenaries. He had rerouted fleet logs, and worst of all, he'd deliberately stalled the launch of the Vanguard's reinforcements during the Ver betrayal. He had blood on his hands. Human blood. Children's blood. And now he was going to answer for it. Inside a clean, glass-paneled office at the top of the orbital command spire, Eland Cray poured himself a glass of brandy, unaware, or pretending not to know, that the building's security systems had gone dark 4 minutes ago. He sipped slowly, his hands steady. Too steady. You took your time, he said to the empty room. From the shadows, Red stepped out, soaking wet, empty eyes, gun already raised. You're not even going to lie? Red asked quietly. What would be the point? Red stepped closer. You knew. You knew what they were doing. You knew where they took them. You watched that footage and still sold us out. I didn't sell humanity out, Cray said calmly, walking to the window. I saved it. Red didn't lower the gun. You sold information that led to the deaths of over 2,000 children. I prevented a war that would have killed 2 billion. No, Red growled. You fed our enemies and hoped they'd keep the wolves at bay. Cray turned slowly. I kept Earth in the game, Red. We weren't ready. You know it. Half the colonies are still patching power grids, and the outer rim still runs on stolen parts and Martian hand-me-downs. We don't have the strength for a full-scale war with the conquered. So yes, I played the middle. I gave them just enough. Sacrifices for the bigger picture. Red walked forward, barrel to Cray's chest. You're calling children sacrifices now? Cray's face didn't change. They were already gone, Red. Taken long before I lifted a finger. I made their deaths mean something. You think you sound noble? Red asked, his voice low and raw. You sound like every coward who's ever said, "It's just one more." Cray's eyes narrowed. You can shoot me. Hell, I deserve it. But you'll doom Earth if you do. I've been keeping half the knives off our throat with backdoor channels and cold deals. You kill me, the flow stops. I don't care. You should. Red hesitated. Just for a second. And Cray lunged. The brandy glass shattered as the two men crashed into the side desk. Red hit the floor hard, gun knocked loose. Cray reached for it, but Red was faster. He kicked Cray in the ribs, sending him sprawling into the glass wall. Still fighting like the old days, Cray coughed. I'm not the same man you knew, Red said coldly, retrieving the pistol. Neither am I. I noticed. He tied Cray to the chair with flex cuffs and jammed the door shut. Then he triggered a shortwave burst from his wrist pad. Within minutes, 2 unmarked VTOLs landed on the Spire's pad. No insignias, no press, no ceremony, just black-suited intelligence officers and a containment unit with no questions asked. Soren himself stepped out of one. Red looked him dead in the eyes. We have our traitor. Soren looked at Cray, bloody but smirking. You sure? Test his logs, match the encryption to the holo, confirm the fleet reroutes. He's the one. Understood. And Soren? Yes? Don't let him talk. Just shut him down. Soren nodded once. As Cray was dragged away, Red didn't look back. That night, back at his private quarters, Red sat alone, eyes on a small screen. Footage played, grainy, blurry, children, faces, some rescued, some not. He paused on one, a little girl with curly hair and missing teeth, waving at the camera. He'd never met her, but he'd killed for her, and he'd keep doing it, until every last monster was erased. Across the galaxy, the Concord reeled. Cray's arrest had exposed the pipeline. Secure channels were no longer secure. Terran intel swept through every back door, every deal, every handshake soaked in blood. And the holo? They were being hunted, one by one. No trials, no diplomacy, just shadow units dragging bodies from bunkers, execution by fire, disposal by vacuum. Earth had been betrayed. Now it was purging, but not all enemies die in shadow. Some regroup, some plan, and some wait for weakness. On a barren moon, near the edge of known space, a new fleet was being built. Not conquered, not Vair, not even mercenaries. Something older, colder, the Drazari, a species long believed extinct, forgotten, but not gone. And now, they had found humanity's rage. They liked it. They wanted it. They were coming to feed it. The stars over Cetus Fringe flickered unnaturally, not from nebula radiation, not from gravitational distortions, from the arrival of something older than fear itself. A ship. But it wasn't made of metal. It moved like bone, grew like fungus, and pulsed with the rhythm of something alive. It was a vessel, yes, but it breathed. Inside its walls, thousands of Drazari warriors stirred in unison, muscle-bonded, psychically tethered, bred from war and designed for domination. They did not believe in peace. They had no need for diplomacy. They only moved for one reason: challenge. And Earth, in all its righteous fury, had finally roared loud enough to be noticed. Commander Red stood at the edge of the asteroid Citadel, a Terran forward base constructed in secret after the Conquered betrayals. Black steel. Gravity-warped floors, dozens of planetary rail cannons embedded like claws reaching toward the stars. He was tired. Not in body. In soul. The war hadn't broken him, but the victory had stained him. Eland Cray was gone, executed in silence, buried in concrete, without a name. Earth's purge was nearly complete. The hollow network shattered. The child trafficking rings collapsed. Human children were returning home, broken, but alive. And yet something gnawed at Red's spine like a whisper behind the wind, something that hadn't been accounted for. Something coming. Then the warning came. A flash. A pulse across deep space. A signal picked up only by old Earth satellites, tuned to forgotten frequencies. It wasn't from the conquered. It wasn't from pirates. It wasn't even from the hollow. It was a Drazari war chant, broadcast not in words, but in images. Red watched it unfold on the screen in front of him. First, a vision of Earth's scorched battlefields, then the children, caged, weeping, tortured, then the last image, a Drazari general, bowing. Red narrowed his eyes. What the hell is this? They're admiring us, said the intel officer beside him, voice shaking. They've studied every war file, every operation, every retaliation we've executed since the prison raid. And they think Earth is the future. Red's stomach turned. They've watched us tear through half the Concord, the officer added, and now they're not coming to conquer us. He turned slowly. They're coming to recruit us. President Halden slammed his fist into the conference table. What does that even mean? Recruit? They believe Earth is ready to ascend, Admiral Niles said, laying down the decoded signal packet. The Drazari call it the Cull. It happens once every few thousand years. They search for a species that proves its savagery, its will to dominate, its purity of vengeance. And we passed? Halden asked, voice cracking. No, Niles said grimly. We excelled. Soren, arms crossed, leaned forward. They watched us retaliate for our children, watched us destroy our enemies without hesitation. They think we're like them, that we've grown beyond morality, that we've become worthy. Worthy of what? Halden asked. The room fell silent. Then Red's voice came through the monitor feed from the Citadel. Worthy of extinction or invitation? The Drazari didn't invade Earth directly. That would have been easy, predictable. Instead, they sent a single emissary, one being, wrapped in living armor, unarmed, standing 2 stories tall, with skin like cracked obsidian and glowing blue eyes. It arrived aboard a silent capsule that crashed into the ocean outside the ruined Nova Sydney coast. Within hours, it walked into a United Terran base and spoke without using a mouth. Its words rang in the minds of everyone around it. We did not touch your children, but we saw those who did, and we watched what you became afterward. You slaughtered without restraint. You hunted without apology. You evolved through grief. You are the first species since our ancestors who remind us of ourselves. We offer you a place beside us. The base commander, a woman who had lost her son in the early raids, raised her rifle. Go to hell. The Drazari did not flinch. Hell is where you belong, and that is why we admire you. Back at the Citadel, Red watched the footage. He had killed monsters in orbit, slaughtered enemies in cages, executed traitors in cold blood. And now he was being praised by something worse than all of them. He stared at the silent room. Then he said, "This isn't a peace offering. It's an infection. They're trying to pull us into their madness." Soren, patched through from Earth, replied, "And if we decline?" "They don't believe in decline." Admiral Niles nodded. "They don't believe in mercy either." Red stood. Then let's remind them who they're talking to. Earth sent its reply not with words, but with detonation. They destroyed the capsule that brought the emissary. They nuked the landing site. They broadcasted the footage across the stars, and they added a single message. We are not your brothers. We are your end. What followed was the greatest battle humanity had ever fought. The Drazari didn't come in waves. They didn't attack cities. They came for Earth's soul. They dropped biological horrors onto orbital farms, swarms of spiked drones that fed on oxygen, shape-shifting parasites that mimicked human children, begging to be saved, only to explode on contact. They fought with manipulation, not just metal. They turned captured soldiers into beacons, broadcasting Earth's own pain back at itself. But Red, he didn't waver, he didn't blink, because he'd already seen the worst thing the galaxy had to offer, our children in cages. Everything else was just noise. On the final night of the campaign, Red stood at the front of Crucible Station, orbital cannons surrounding him, alarms blaring, walls shaking from Drazari kinetic strikes. He turned to his crew. No speech, no glory. Just 5 words. No one touches Earth again. And then he led the final charge. They boarded the Drazari flagship, fighting through bile-soaked corridors and walls that bled when touched. The enemy didn't beg. They smiled. They thought Earth was joining them. They didn't understand Earth never joins monsters. We bury them. Red reached the core, faced the Drazari High Warlord, a living god wrapped in fire, and burned it down with his last rail round. He didn't escape. He didn't try. He died in the explosion. But his name became legend. Years later, when Earth was rebuilding, when the stars stopped bleeding, and the children began dreaming again, a monument stood in the ashes of Crucible Station. A soldier, no helmet, no flag, just a fist raised skyward, and the plaque read, "Here stood a man who reminded the galaxy that vengeance is not weakness, that love can become fire, and that when you cage our children, you summon our extinction, not yours."